Hi, honey.
Hi!
Hi. That's Elise Keller,
And that's Elizabeth White.
and this is Theology.
Ology.
Yes, I love it. Okay, that was better too. I'm gonna say that every week. That was better. That was better. Eventually, I'm gonna be like, that
I
was fine.
know.
And we're gonna stop,
Exactly. Yeah, and
and
redo.
we're gonna
Yeah,
record it, and we're gonna play
yeah,
the same one every time.
I love it.
How are you? Did you get your baking done?
I did. My house smells delicious, actually. I got 3 loaves of Easter bread done. I went to my Catholic church today. I went to Palm Sunday Mass,
Oh.
and that's that. And now I'm doing just this the Sunday stuff. So, how about you? What are you
I
doing?
love it. So I went to my Anglo-Catholic, my Anglican church Palm Sunday, which I have never been to. This is the first like liturgical church
I was
experience I've had
thinking of
on
you this
Sunday.
morning. Yes.
And so we've done palm leaves and stuff. Oh, do I still have it? Oh no, I took it off. I have they like made little cross palm
Yes.
leaves,
Yes.
which I out of palm leaves which I pinned on, and we got palms and we did a procession around the church, like on the
Yep.
street. And we sang. I loved it. I actually did not get to ask, and I want to, but maybe you know that it's thing. The crosses were draped this week in red fabric.
Yes, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know the significance to that.
Okay.
All of our statues were draped, the crucifix was draped,
Right.
and like our choir they were in like black and red, I believe, and our priest was is he still in purple this week? I think
Mine
so.
was in
Yeah.
red. Mine even had red on in his.
Oh, maybe he did have red on. Because
I think.
we had two, so I don't know, I can't remember.
I think
I should know,
in the
I was there for
liturgical
now.
calendar, it's still like the purple, but
Right.
today being Red Sunday, so it probably could be either. Which I
Yes.
didn't know what Red Sunday was. Okay, I
Yeah.
still don't actually. I don't know, but and I didn't have time to look it up after church. But our priest made a joke, and he was like, "We're gonna walk out in the street and walk around the church." And he said, "Wait a minute, not out in the street, just the sidewalk, or else we'll
Yeah.
have a different kind of Red Sunday."
Yeah.
We were like, "What a goober!" And that's why that church is so fun. It's so
I
good.
know, I know, I love that. Yeah,
I love.
we did a lot of standing today versus like
Mhm.
we did do a lot of like up and down as usual. I'm sure you've heard that
The
joke. It's
Catholic
like,
calisthenics. Oh, we do that
yeah,
at the Anglican church too now. So
yeah, exactly. So, but today we did like a lot of standing and I didn't wear the right shoes. Like I wore heels and I'm like, why did I do this? So that was
well,
fun.
I just realized I put together today. I've never had knee problems my whole life.
Yeah,
I've had hip. I mean, I have all the. So I like celebrate any joint that doesn't bother me because so
right.
many do. And
Yeah,
I've always been like, but my knees don't bother me. It's because we are on our. I just put together getting up and down. I've never been up and down on my knees person,
yes,
and I've started praying, kneeling to pray even at home because of
yeah.
that. But I'm gonna have to do some strengthening stuff. I'm getting tennis knee. I'm getting prayer knee. Like I don't know. So poor
Our
guy.
weather's been really like up and down and it's been really cold. If you hear snorting in the back, Franny is like off to the side here. She just ate and she's like snorting.
I
Anyway, it's been really cold and I went with my mom this morning and she was like, I have to sit because we were like kneeling for a while too and she's like, I have to sit down. Like my knees are really bothering me. So,
yeah. They say now they started saying kneel in body or spirit, and I like that. So I'm not gonna feel bad if I kneel in spirit sometimes. But
absolutely not.
I like the physicality of it.
Right.
I do, but that's not always going to be an option. And it's really rainy today, and so yeah. Um, whew. But we are for folks that will be listening to this at the end of the week. This is probably going to come out either on Good Friday or Saturday, between Good Friday and Easter. But this morning was Palm Sunday, which you might have gathered from this, and we are going to talk about. We're going to start by taking a question because we took a question from Claire and then we revisited a little bit again. And now that was about prayer. And now we have talked to Claire, and she's going to come on one of our future episodes
Yay.
coming soon. That's going to be Claire in prayer, I think. So that'll
I
be a
love
fun
that.
one. But today we took a question from our friend Kristen. And this was such a good question that is so hard to answer. This is just going to be just like indicative of how we're going to be answering all questions.
Yeah.
Her question is, why do we want everlasting life? Which is that's an answer. Actually, that is almost the topic because
Yeah.
it's so that could almost be the whole topic, but that's a big one. So, like, I think there are theological things we can talk about, but I also have like deeply personal reasons why I want to that I relate to. I'm wondering if that goes for you too. Do you have reasons you want to, or like inversely don't want to, or you think that
Yes.
sounds
See,
terrible and hard?
I feel like I've always had this feeling that eternity, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, like eternity is going to be boring. or like can are we going to be bored? What are we going to be doing? Like, is heaven just wearing a choir outfit and like playing a harp?
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean? Like that's always like my, I don't want to call it a fear, but that's like my worry. It's like, am I going to be bored? Because I'm such a busybody. Like, I really like, I like to be busy and I like to be doing things and I whatever. And I know obviously that's like a personality thing and a physical body thing, and all of those things are going to be different. But the idea, oh, thank you. The idea of the idea of eternity is like I mean that's a big, I can think about that one for a while. I can kind of spiral on that one.
I so it's funny because my response is the same basically. When I have a different response now, but I have lifelong had that. In fact, my first existential crisis, which occurred when I was like 10, roughly 9 or 10. And it started at Disneyland, which is a whole other topic. But if you don't go to Disneyland and have an existential crisis, then I don't know if I understand you. Um,
Right.
but I love it, but there's a lot of existential stuff going on there. So um, the idea of that used to terrify me. It just, what is the phobia of like big open vast spaces? That's ocean.
Yes.
Thalassophobia, I think is it.
Yeah.
I don't have that, but I feel like it's the same thing. It's just the vastness and unendingness is
It's overwhelming.
yeah, it's overwhelming and almost like on a visceral animal level, but we don't realize that. So it becomes like we're afraid of boredom, we're afraid of those things. But I think there's like an animal, because an animal instinct that just doesn't fit with, because we are these internal clocks. So that goes to the topic we're going to talk about. So that's a tough one. Why do we? Great question. I think a lot of people don't. But I will tell you why now it has become such a comfort to me. So
Please.
um one thing is I have to talk about myself to do this, but one of the things I've had like a few different careers already. And I don't have enough. Like I still don't know what want to be when I grow up, right?
I I relate to that so hard.
And like I have my job, I have my technically dream job, and I run a nonprofit, just for folks that don't know. But I it's good work and I love it and I'm sure it's my calling, but I still really want to be like silly stuff. I want chances to hike everywhere, and
Yes.
I want to be a librarian. Like I wish I could go back and be a librarian and an archaeologist. And I think I told you that I almost went back to school to be an archaeologist, but I just got into a different school, so I did that. Like um I want to do so many things, and like I don't feel like, it breaks my heart. I get in a crisis now where there's no way I'm going to get to do everything I want to do in this life.
Yes.
There's no way.
I feel that.
Yeah, so I think that's also you because of the doing. I think, well, I'll get there, but I think that so it's that, and then also, I have nothing, it's nothing crazy, but I have some physical stuff that means that I I am limited. Like I'm not as much as I could be, but I'm not going to climb another mountain probably unless I get my hip replaced, and maybe I will.
Right.
But I'm not going to do some of the things that like I want a glorified body, I want to be able to do all the
Yes.
things. I
Yes.
I I don't dance like I used to be able to dance. I don't like I feel I want to play music. There are things that I have gifts for and things that I don't, that I
Right.
want to pursue. There's
Yes.
just literally there's not going to be time in this life.
Yes.
And if that hadn't been so profoundly upsetting and sad for me, maybe this wouldn't be so powerful.
Yeah.
Idea then that we get into eternal life, living for eternity isn't the same thing as like I don't we're not going to be floating on a cloud playing a harp
Right.
for all eternity. I mean, we don't really know. We don't know exactly. But what we do know is that ultimately we're going to be on a new earth in our like perfected bodies, and in the earth that got the way God intended it. And in that, I know that there will be no pain. That's very clear. I know that the world will be perfect, and it will be as Eden intended it. So,
Right.
it'll be beautiful and wonderful, but there will still be work to do because
Yes.
we are going to be physical people. There won't be
Yes.
death and injury, but there will still be things to be done. So, I have a vision for it that is just that it'll be a period of like the kind of, because we think we don't want to work, but imagine a life of eternity with no work, with
Exactly.
nothing you must do. And
Yes.
that seems pointless. I think it seems so, and maybe that's our body. Maybe that is our the filter of our mind and our body on earth that gives me that.
But I don't think that it is, because even in the very beginning, God gave Adam the job to work. Like
That's true.
he was to work, and but he wasn't to toil fruitlessly. And I actually make a joke
Oh,
about that, especially like the house that we bought is very much like a fixer upper, and I've talked about this, and the whole like, I'm sure at some point on some topic I'll get into how the house came to be and whatever, but I've had a lot of like mixed emotions about this house and like my age and how things progressed in this current timeline. And like I always feel like I'm running out of time or I don't have enough time. And then I always make the joke that like I'm going to toil endlessly in this house. And
oh.
you know what I mean? And it's not going to like go anywhere. But my hope then always, and it really is a joke, because there are so many things that like A, I've gotten really good at, B, I've learned a lot of lessons, and I think that's a big God thing. I've learned a lot of patience, which I really typically don't have, and I've worked on that because I would pray for patience, and I think God was like, well, then here's a whole house for you to be patient with. But
You did not learn the timeless lesson that you're never supposed to ask and you shall be given, especially when you pray for patience.
it's so true. And but yeah, I think there's so many things that I have found that I really enjoy. Like I love decorating, and I love interior design, and I love to garden, and I love to be outside, and I hope that that is my work in some eternal way. Like I don't know, obviously we don't know what that's going to look like, but yeah, I think people really do have gifts, and I think those gifts are just going to blossom in a
Mm.
perfect world, and you can't even fathom it because everything is so hard and corrupted, and you know what I mean, there's a dampening of it
Okay,
here.
I do. And actually you spoke directly to my heart because it's the same thing I love. Like I love my work, but I originally went to school for design and
Yeah.
I I love to make things beautiful and I am certain. And the same thing with gardening and in general. I want to make everything beautiful.
Yes.
And I that work is real. That work, like I'm certain that God will use that work. So you're absolutely right that there's time to do that. Like that's not going to be there's time for us to be all the things. And
Right.
in that there's time for everything. So there's more that I want to say to answer that question because this whole thing in a way answers that question, but I wanted to frame it around her question about why do we want everlasting life? But I think the things that come up in that are also having maybe some, well, we tend to have like a not exactly biblical, but more cultural understanding of what we think the afterlife is.
Sure.
So that can throw it off, that can make it sound not that fun,
Not that great. Yeah.
right? But then we also have misunderstandings about time and eternity. And I think we have misunderstandings about ourselves, but I don't know, like I can't say that for sure that's a feeling. Um, I'm gonna start right off the bat and say that I'm gonna recommend. There's a different book I'm gonna recommend that I will link in the show notes called, which I think a lot of people have probably read. It's "Surprised by Hope" by N.T. Wright, and that one I read right when I first was becoming Anglican last year, and I it was sort of deciding is this a denomination I can live with, I can be a part of,
Sure.
and it was it he's just like a he's a theologian and a biblical scholar. I don't know. I think maybe a biblical scholar is the way to say that for him, but and he happens to be Anglican. So it was just another I was just looking at another angle. I didn't realize even that he's this prominent uh person that people read in all different denominations and faiths and how wonderful and you know he's really good thinker, but a lot of what he talks about is that we are living in a world, we're doing work for the future world, for the everything we do even now is working towards when heaven comes to earth. Like we talk about this intermediate period of like the immediate afterlife, which is heaven. We there's like this could be a really big topic and maybe a long too long almost, but we think of heaven as like the resting place, the final resting place. It's actually not.
But it's not. Right.
Right. It's an intermediary place. And although there are people, I've only just learned that there are people who believe actually when you die, you go to rest. You just rest and you wake up when we're resurrected and then your new heaven, new earth. Then so just sleep until your soul essentially sleeps until then. And I thought, well, what about I don't know, because there's the thief on the cross says,
You'll
Jesus
be
says, today you'll be with me in paradise. And they're saying, well, it'll be today for him because when he wakes up, he'll be there. So
yeah.
maybe, I don't know. I know that a lot of times when Jesus talks about heaven, he's talking about the kingdom of heaven, which is going to come down to earth. So I don't know. That's a great one to talk about when we talk about eschatology.
Yeah.
Which at which point we should have an expert come on. No, no, we're gonna do this first round as non-experts, right? All of these
Of course.
we're gonna get more expert as we go.
Yes, I hope so.
Maybe expert's not the right word, but we're gonna learn as we go.
Yeah, we're gonna get more understanding, I hope.
So yes, I mean that's the goal, right? That's all of this is moving towards more understanding. But a lot of that did a really good job of painting a picture of what the future will be, and it's in that, and he doesn't go into great detail because again we don't know, but I think it gives you an imagination for it. A lot of the book is spent helping us understand what it means to work towards the kingdom of heaven on earth and sort of convincing folks that it's already here. So there's another topic, and I think it's beautiful. It has informed my current theology a lot, but it's a really good one for having hope for eternity, I think. And the hope is the more practical. It's a practical hope, which for me is really useful. So I don't, it's been a while since I read it, so I don't know exactly which ideas, but I know that a lot of the ideas I'm going to talk about probably originated from there. And so I wanted to call that out and credit it
Yeah,
because I don't even know which ones, but I know that some are.
right.
So calling that out right off the top. um,
I think about that too, just like my mom always used to say whenever I was growing up, like, it doesn't matter if you're gonna be a garbage man, but you should work to be the best garbage man that you can be. And I think a lot of that is really just like you're working for in all of your work it should reflect the glory of God. That should be, and even though it doesn't have, like, you're not necessarily going to be a priest or a
right,
deacon or something, but all of your work, like the actual work of your hands, can reflect the goodness.
right. And in any work. So that's actually a great way. I started to segue into the next, but it's really both. I don't know that there's going to be a segue between Kristen's
Right.
question because I think it's so integrated, and
Yeah.
I keep starting to make a separation, but I don't think I can, and I don't think I need to. Look at this bruise on my hand. I keep showing off my bruise keeps showing up. Everybody, if you watch the video and see this horrible bruise on my hand since I talked with it, no idea what happened. It's not from an IB. We
She's
don't know.
teaching people a lesson.
Pow, right in the kisser. Uh,
Sorry.
so I have a feeling it's from putting my cup through my hand through those metal cups through the handle
Yes.
walking to the airport, and I think that's what it's from. So sorry if you see me waving my hand and it's bruised. Uh, my I also this sense of wanting to do these things that I haven't gotten a chance to do, but also feeling like the work that we do here
Matters.
isn't enough. Like we do it, whatever work it is that we're doing, it feels like is it actually though contributing to the kingdom? and and what I'm not going to complete this work. So there are two things I want to reference that come up for me about that. One of them is a book by Tolkien called a small book called Leaf by Niggle, which I know I've talked about before on in our other talks a little bit.
Yeah.
uh, and it's a creature who spends his whole life, in essence he creates this leaf. He has a dream of this beautiful tree he wants to make, but in his life all he accomplishes is a leaf. But then he goes to the afterlife and finds the tree that he was the tree
Oh
his
wow.
dream, the thing did was
Yeah.
made, and but it was made by God, and we don't see what we're doing on the holy plane, on the heavenly, whatever, however you want to think about it, how it's contributing. And again, that's metaphorical, that's not a literal, you know.
Sure.
If you made a stained glass window, it doesn't mean you will have made a whole church, but there is more. We're doing something. When I'm planting seeds, I'm thinking, I know that I'm planting native flower seeds in my yard. It's like I'm trying to reclaim a little bit of land for, I guess, Eden in a way. It's like I'm middle of a small town.
Exactly.
Monarchs pass through here
Yep.
in October. So
Yes.
we get, and it's beautiful, and I have this little meadow of lantana that they love. But I don't have milkweed, which is the only place they'll lay their eggs, right? So
Yep.
that's not natural because we pull that up.
Yeah.
And there are all these little things you can do to be a wildlife way station or to be a monarch habitat sort of thing. Not
Yes.
habitat, but and I'm thinking I started to do that. I started to really work on that in my garden and yard. And then I started going, what is the point? Like, what is the point of this? This is like, I got a little, this isn't going to spread to the whole world. What is the point? And then, and how is this going to have any, and at the time last spring, I was in the garden working and I had my headphones on and I was listening to Surprised by Hope and he kept talking about the things you're building for the future. And I'm going, I don't understand how this contributes. I still don't understand.
Yeah.
But then he used an analogy and talked about when cathedrals are built. So cathedrals are built even now, but over centuries. They're built over centuries.
Right.
Your hands might work on them, and you'll never see the end result. So
Yes.
you're a stonemason, and your job is to carve this beautiful shape out of this stone. You don't have a vision for what it's going to be. You don't see the whole cathedral. You don't see the lives, the marriages and births and funerals and deaths, all the things that are going to happen in that space, the worship that's going to happen, the glory that's going to happen to God, the bad things that are going to happen. You don't see it, but there
But
is a
you've
person. There's
contributed
the
to it.
architect has a vision.
Yes.
And you won't see it in your lifetime, but that doesn't mean it doesn't go on. It doesn't mean it's not your legacy. And it's not a perfect metaphor, but oh, it was enough. It was
Yeah.
enough. Between
Yeah.
that and Leaf by Niggle, like I'm okay with this, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I guess it's that there will be work I'll get to complete. I'll get to keep learning and keep being creative and doing things and making beautiful things and figuring out what the purpose was because that's God's actual vision.
Right.
But then there are the other questions, which is about time.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are two different aspects of time that we kind of want to touch on. One is just like timelessness, eternity and time. And then there's the gods outside of timeless. This is not going to be a one episode
No.
topic. It's just not. But okay, should we start with just time as the fourth dimension? Do you want to start there?
Okay. Yeah, let's start there.
Okay. So a one-dimensional thing, you know what a one-dimensional thing is, right? Okay. Two-dimensional, now you have a lot, a drawing, a pencil drawing, flat on a page, that's two-dimensional. So you take a square, you could say one-dimensional is a point. That's not exactly true. That's a little tricky to say, but for ease of that, a line
Yeah.
or or a square could be two-dimensional. Three-dimensional, now you have a cube. And so now this thing exists here.
Yeah.
The fourth dimension is time. That is this thing existing through it. So a thing can't actually exist in just space. There's actually no such thing as space without time.
Right.
Okay, right? Am I making sense so far? I mean,
Yep.
I know you already know this, so maybe this is making sense, but tell me
No,
if
but
I'm
you're explaining it well.
okay. So we have because if so we're like so I'm not a scientist, so this is like from mostly from science fiction, but it's the science parts and read. But we're matter is actually constantly in motion. It's moving because it's not actually solid. There's space between the atoms. That's where you get into all that vibration and frequency. But in a given moment, a thing isn't necessarily solid, right? It's solid in time and
In
space.
time and space.
It can have physical take up physical space because it exists over a length of time. So those things are intertwined. And so a couple more examples of how space and time are intertwined because I think it's really important because we can think of time as a fixed amount, whatever measurement of time, right? An hour is an hour is an hour, no matter where you are in the universe. It doesn't matter that our day, that is about how fast our planet turns around, takes an hour. Ultimately, we think, but the time that passes that feels like 60 minutes is going to be the same wherever you are.
Right.
That's not true, which is crazy. So Isaac Newton originally his first like Newtonian idea of time was time is fixed, and I think basically everything else flows out of that, right? So that's kind of the basis for reality, and it's a part of the fabric of reality. What then Einstein with the theory of relativity and other things figured out what we now really understand, what has now been kind of even proven through quantum physics that even further that time is not fixed. And so it changes. You know about time and gravity?
Yes, like the
Okay.
higher, isn't it like the higher you go,
The
the faster it, the faster time. I don't know if that, but I know what you're talking about when
so
it goes.
so there's a great, maybe I'll include it. I'll try to find a graph. I'm sure I can find a graphic of this, but they show, you'll see these infographics, these images, and it's like the a planet is sitting on a mesh, like a
Yeah.
mesh
Oh
screen,
yeah. Yeah.
right? And then but where a planet is or a star, it like sinks down because time,
Yes.
it tracks time, and so it pulls, so
Okay.
time, the time that passes, say near a black hole, like near an event horizon of a black hole, which is, so that's a super 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 dense, so the gravity is incredible, just
Okay.
absolutely so incredible that, the more mass something, like it had, the greater the gravitational pull, so it becomes so much that it sucks in everything into it. But because of that, the gravity is happening in such a way that it if you if one person was to, have you seen Interstellar?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a great example. So the time
Yes.
passes differently, and it's not just, it doesn't just feel different to the person, it actually is different for the person experiencing
Right.
it, because time really does pass differently because of gravity and because of how space works. So they're intertwined. The other great way to understand this is that we think of light years, right? Light
Yes.
years as a measurement of time. It's not. It's a measurement of distance,
Okay.
because, okay, so a light year is how long, or how far,
How
I'm sorry,
how far light takes.
right, how long it takes it to go a certain distance, right? So if it's 1,000 light years away, it means it takes 1,000, that's how long it takes for light to get here. 1,000,
Right.
right? So I said that really poorly. Okay, I'm gonna have to put a pin in this. I'm almost gonna probably edit this part out and say it again because I did that really badly. Okay, because I also all of a sudden forgot how this whole thing works. All this thing I talk about all the time, I don't know how it works anymore. Um, it's good, good brain. But okay, all right. Because all of a sudden I was like, is that even right? Did I say that right? I say this all the time. Space time. Light years are, yeah, it's so far away because it's how far light travels in a certain amount of time. So it's a measurement of distance because that's how far away something is. And we only know
Correct.
how far that star away is. We can know how far away is because of how long it takes the light to get here. And
Yes.
right now, that is the max speed that we think of, is capable of being traveled. And that's how far fast light can travel. But do remember that light is actually made of particles. Light is not an immaterial thing that we see. It is actually photons. There actually is material to it, maybe microscopic but not invisible, but so that's as fast as it can go. So again, space and time are totally intertwined in that
Right.
they're one and the same. And
Yes.
so when you hear the space-time continuum, like space-time, really the same thing. It really is.
Yeah.
So we have other experiences of time being relative though, right? Like you've experienced, who has that quote? Have you ever heard that quote? Like a 5 minutes sitting next to a pretty girl. It's a guy. It's like Mark Twain or something. But somebody like that can feel so short. But 5 minutes with your hand on a hot stove,
Yes,
no way,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Or like there's nothing I belong to Orange Theory, which is a gym, and there's like a meme that they put out that's like nothing takes longer than a 1 minute all out, which is like our sprint.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean? So a 1 minute sprinting takes forever, but 1 minute sitting here is nothing.
So we already know that time is subjective because really our experience of reality is how, I mean, this is the whole other thing. Right now, our earthly reality, our experience of earthly reality is completely shaped by our perception of it. I don't know that I'd say like reality itself is shaped by our perception, but our experience of reality is shaped by our perception. And so it's relative. One thing is also, when you're a kid, think how slow time
Yes.
passes. It's
Yeah.
a larger percentage of your life.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, I
And
think
now,
another school year's over.
yeah.
I can't I can't my kids just started school and we're talking, it's
And
spring
you're
break.
done.
And then
Yeah.
now it's then I so that changes with time. So it's all kind of relative. But I've always thought, I've always subscribed to the idea that, you and I both say this all the time. God's timeless. God is timeless, right? Okay, when
Yep.
you say that, I want to know what you mean when you say that, because I just found out that not everybody means what you and I have meant when we said that. So I want to make sure that I'm actually thinking the same thing you are. What
Yeah,
do you
maybe
mean when
we're,
you
I
say
know,
God is timeless?
maybe we're not thinking the same thing. So when I think, first of all, when I think of God, I don't think of like some old man in the sky. Like
Okay.
that is not what I think of. I think we definitely have talked about this. Like I think of God as um like spirit, like an essence, and he took on a physical body. So then, like, yeah, you can picture him as a man. But when I think of God, I don't picture, like I said, it's not like some wizard with like a white beard or something. Like, that's not who I'm picturing. So when I think of God, I think of like his, like an essence, and he created time. So he is, for me, he is outside of time because he created it.
Okay. That is the same way I think of it. But
Okay.
apparently, apparently I had no idea, and it was really funny because I we had already had we had this topic on our list of podcast topics, and then I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago I got a text from my priest saying I'm going to be talking
Yeah.
about space time
Yeah.
continuum and time, and I was like, oh, this is good, this was really
Yeah.
good. Um and he ended up having to drop the quantum physics one because this was for Wednesday nights, and maybe turns out didn't have time for that. But he talked about actually how the idea of God being timeless is sort of outdated, and that's not very biblical. And I was going like, I don't or
Oh,
maybe there's an argument that it isn't, but
okay.
it's just that we weren't but then when he explained what it is, what it seems like it is, it's actually what we were thinking of as timeless. So I want to main reason I say that is I want to make a distinction between like apparently the theological term of a timeless God and the way we were using it. So I don't think it's a different, I don't think our concepts have changed. It's just the
Okay.
language maybe. So
Yeah.
you know how like a word in a word has a meaning that's the colloquial meaning, but then like the official meaning is something else. So to me, it's still timeless. But the I look at it the same way. God is out. We also say outside of time,
Yeah.
right? But what I think the confusion was is that I guess that way that is typically defined as God being exclusively outside of time. And they're like, well,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
he can't interact with us if he does that. And I thought,
No.
well,
Yeah, I
okay,
don't
well
agree
that's
with
yeah, that's not what I think. So that's
that.
fine.
Right.
Right. So I agree. I think he is outside in time. Okay, he is not subject to time.
Yes.
It's a better way to put it. Time
Yeah.
is subject to him
Yes.
because that's what you're because he created it. So
Yeah.
he doesn't he can work within time, of course, because he does everything he does. And then when when Christ took on a human body and came, he experienced time even more. He entered fully into time. And I think God frequently enters into time with us.
Yes. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, like a timeless being then subjecting himself to the constraints of time is yet another aspect of his character, and it shows that he's willing to do not so great things for us. Like
Right.
you know what I mean? He's
Mm.
willing to subject himself. And I think I mean, we could talk about this too, but I think it's really interesting if you look at like the Greek or the Romans idea of like mythical time and like the god of time, like Kronos, like he was a deity that they worshipped and he was in charge of time. He was a titan, and he he uh ate his children so that they wouldn't usurp him. He was not a nice god. And it's interesting, I think, always to think about that sort of idea of it. Like they looked at time as a a tyrant, and I think we still kind of do because we always feel like we're under the pressure of time, we're working within time. It's sometimes I think people even worship time because, like we've talked about, you feel like you're running out
Oh,
of time, and you can kind of you can put that above God. So when you think of it and when you personify time, it makes it even more like this is a real constraint here that like
right.
we're working against.
Yeah, I had not. So that made me think of something. Just yesterday, our little guy who's 4 woke up and was telling Daddy and I about a nightmare he had.
Oh.
In which his friends at preschool told him, "You need to be more productive with your time." I'm not kidding. I was like, first of all, that is a very
That's a very mature nightmare
very
to be
grown up thing
having.
to be concerned about.
Yes.
And the language he used, that's just like he's like, I don't know, this is a funny thing. That's another thing, I guess. But I was like, oh, so like he's feeling the constraint of time already, right?
Right.
I don't know if I don't know if I don't know if this is biblical or not. I'd have to look it up. I just don't know if time was part of God's original best plan for us, or
Right.
if it's uh to use a word I saw somewhere, an accommodation to us, to our human bodies
Okay.
that are
Yeah.
perishable. And like
Yes.
all of a sudden when we knew death, that create all of a sudden there is an end point. And what
Exactly.
is time if there's no beginning and no end, there's no time.
Exactly.
Ooh, that gets confusing. And then you get into questions of the soul. So now I want to talk about these things. I, when we're talking about language, we're talking about timelessness or being outside of time. Again, I think, mean he's outside of it and inside of it. So I don't know. We'll say he's a master of time. Maybe that's the way.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
He
and
molds time to his will.
ooh, I like that. Okay, I like that. That actually makes more sense because he can enter in it, but he can operate outside of it.
Right.
So we have so outside of time, I guess we've talked about this before, where I sort of picture when we're talking about God, has he preordained things or predestined things versus does he just know what's going to happen? And I feel like if you realize that time is a dimension time space is a dimension, imagine that God can zoom out far enough that he can just see the web of how time spreads out. So
Yeah.
again, it's like it's not that he caused, it's not that he ordained it or predestined it or fated it. He sees it overall. And I feel like sometimes the way God works is you see him do this with Israel. He bends and shapes them to his will. He uses folks who didn't deserve to be used necessarily, or
Right.
he said like, you did this, but I'm still using you to carry out my plan, because he's playing the long game. And I don't mean to be like, that's not, I don't mean to be irreverent with that. I don't think God's playing a game, but it's an expression that expresses well that it's more like chess than Uno, right? It's like,
Right.
right.
Exactly.
Or so that's what when we say outside of time, I kind of mean that. But then we get to like the timeless versus eternal versus immortal. So when we talk about our soul, this one really gets me.
Yeah.
Okay, we talk because it sounds when we're talking about time flowing, I guess, everywhere. Like again, I think time is contained within eternity.
Yeah.
I don't think yeah, I think they're interconnected and interwoven and it's a section of eternity, but also we talk about so our soul, it would be eternal if our soul always existed and was going to be immortal. So for the purpose of this argument, we're not suggesting that our souls are eternal.
Okay.
The only thing that's eternal would be God. The only uncreated to be eternal, you'd have to not be created.
Right.
You would have always had to exist.
Right. Yes.
That'd be God. Okay.
Yes.
So eternity, eternity, only God.
Yes.
Um, which is a why we talk about my little thing that I'll touch on too about eternity. Don't let me I'm going to come back to this point.
Okay.
Eternity flowing in all directions. We've talked about that, so don't let me forget to come back to that.
Yeah.
But we are lasting, or our souls are everlasting, or they're
Everlasting. Yeah.
immortal, in that our souls, once they are begun, can't stop.
They continue on. Yes.
Right. So this brings me back to another Kristen's question, because one of the things that Jesus said, I'm gonna have to pull this up, in Matthew 10:28, he said, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." So the alter part of the reason we want eternity is because we do not want to be destroyed. Like our soul being destroyed. I mean, I know there are lots of people, different ways people interpret that, if it's, total annihilation or eternal torment
Right.
or all those things. But I think what we learn here is that it can end, but only God can. Earth cannot end your soul, right? The things here cannot.
Right.
So it is something beyond Earth, but is still even eternal. An eternal soul is subject to God.
Yes.
So if it's not good for us to be eternal and lasting, we won't be. God will eternity ends when God says it does. So
Yeah.
that's also part of it. Like we don't want that. The alternative is having your soul cease to exist in hell. So I that's part of the reason that we want to. I realize that's more of a negative, like a deterrent from the other thing than a positive in that lane, but I do think it's important. Does that am I making is this all tying together?
No, that is making sense. And it almost reminds me of like something that I looked up. Um, this physicist was talking about, like, he's a Christian. I think he may even be a priest, if I'm honestly, but he was talking about t time. Wait, let me let me make sure I have this right. The question was, like, his stance is that God is both timeless and can enter into time and
Okay.
has, obviously. And he also talks about like the creation of the world was a really big decision because he was existing for question mark amount of time, like just existing, and then decided to like here's a pin and we're starting, like we're starting creation. And it was a big deal because the way he explained it was God won't, he's not going to annihilate like the entire world as if it never existed because it will always, he will have always created it. It
Mm.
will have always happened. So there is time. I'm not explaining that right,
No,
but
no, I get what you're saying because there's the idea that without the construct of the constraints of time, everything would be happening all at the same time,
yes,
right?
yes. But
So,
he put order to it and started, like, he got the ball rolling.
right. So, what I think one of the things that I think about consciousness and about spirits and souls, and I think also is applicable about time, which you and I have been talking about on the side, but is applicable here is that time is a thing we experience. So whether you experience it on the event horizon of a black hole and a day takes 100, a day
Right.
there is equal to 100 years here. Um, it doesn't matter. Your body still experiences it. Your mind still experiences it as a specific length of time. So obviously it's relative because literally you could have, the twin experiment. One twin goes there and comes back, and the other one's dead, and they're the same age. Like,
Yes.
physically, if you could travel that fast. So we already know that time can be passing differently in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, things are happening at the same. Okay, so now you start getting right. Things are happening all the time, except that we have our brain, which is a filter.
Yeah.
We have our body, which filters our experience. I understand that there are different approaches that our brain and body create our experience. So that's the people believe that like on a quantum physics level, on a metaphysical level, on a metaphysical level. That's one way to think about it, or just scientific. You see the neurons firing and the brain lighting up, and so that's what creates your thoughts. There's also an interpretation that everything is outside of you and you experience it, and your body's just like the meat sack that's walking around animated
Right.
by this. Then there's like that we're embodied. God, we are created in God's created bodies that are God's. I don't even know if this is actually a valid like opinion that people have, but and I'm certain if it is, it's not expressed in this language and it's expressed better by someone else. But I think the way I see it is more that our brain and body are filters for it, and there's a certain amount that we can express and experience on this plane in this life, where
Yes.
where we are limited to the four dimensions of experience,
Sure.
which are all created. All of them are created. If you remove, I mean, that's why there has to be separation of time and eternity to some extent because time was okay is created. So we get into this idea that our experience creates reality, and so that already throws us off instead of our spirit, just our experience filters reality. When we think about it through our filters, we realize that God gave us our filters to experience things in a certain way. But when when people when you think about God, built, we get into time when we talk about creation. That's like where the big time
Right.
that I mean, you start
Right.
thinking about time when you open the Bible.
Yes.
Was that literally one day
Right.
or was it not?
Or
Well, if God is working on the crest of a black hole, then really like now I'm starting to see, okay, like now we could talk about 7 days being
right.
whatever, but time
Yeah.
is for us. Time is
Yeah.
not. For him, he created it for us. So that one gets me, and I don't know, and I don't really care how long that takes because it's a topic to talk about, but it doesn't
Right.
matter, right?
Yeah.
Because
Agreed.
time is different for God. So I just wonder if when we get to that everlasting time where we don't, I do, we'll have physical bodies on Earth still. I mean, it's still going to be this. I think it's going to be this Earth, a new heaven, but made
Yep.
over, right?
Yes.
But will we
I
still?
mean, that's what I think.
But will we still even experience it as time?
Right.
If it's created and God remade it, and time was part of the almost the brokenness or the limit part of the limited nature that He had to give us, will time even still exist, or will we just experience things as we
Uh,
experience them on a
do,
spiritual level? So, like, will it even feel like eternity?
do you think, or I guess, how do you view, like in Genesis, when, okay, he created, like, he separated day and night? Is that time to you? Like, do you think there was, like, how do you think,
I think when He created day and night means He created the earth in the rotation. Like He
okay,
created where we our understanding of day
yeah,
and night, because He's
yeah,
speaking to us. So He created, an earth that rotates and sometimes sees the moon and the darkness, and sometimes you're facing the sun, and so your day.
right,
I think that's how I interpreted it.
okay,
But
just curious.
but it was a great question because I don't know that we know. Why? What do you think?
I don't know. Because I'm thinking about it in terms of like new heaven, new earth. Is
Hmm.
there still going to be day and night? I don't know because I think there is a passage in Revelation that said it will like we won't even need the sun or the
Yeah, the
moon.
sun will pass away in Jerusalem or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So
That
maybe
I don't know.
and that I mean that
That's a
lends to the
fun
idea that
topic,
like time won't exist.
right? I mean, it
But
makes you wonder,
yeah,
or if we will experience time
different.
as a differently because we'll experience it more. Maybe something where we're inside, we understand, we can understand the process, the passage of time, but don't experience it
Right.
necessarily. Is that what it means to be immortal and ageless? So
Right.
that one's iffy. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I have two more ideas,
Okay.
and one of them you've heard, we've talked about, and one of them I don't think you have. No, maybe you have, and it's real dorky. It's real dorky. Okay, so just bear with me. Uh, so first of all, time flow or eternity flowing in all directions.
Okay.
This is often one of my, it's not an answer, but it's one of my thoughts that I give people when they talk about theodicy. So how a benevolent God can truly be good and truly be all powerful, and still we live in a world where there's suffering. And I one of the things that I think is possible is that when God makes all things new, when we earth world is perfected and it becomes new heaven and new earth, for all of eternity there will be no more sadness. I eternity, as we talked about earlier, flows in all directions. Eternity isn't from here on forward. Eternity is from here on out. It's
Yes.
always. So
Yeah.
what if it remakes things for all of eternity to
Sure.
exactly the way? So my thought is that we are not, we know that physically you can actually technically travel into the future, because if you travel faster, you know what I mean, there's that whole concept, but there's no way, we don't have a way to travel into the past,
Right.
because this is our fixed point that we're starting from no matter what. We just
Yeah.
don't. Maybe so. That is theoretically impossible. Um, as just as much as traveling to the future, I guess, is no longer theoretically. I mean, it's still theoretically. We haven't done it, but we understand how it could be done. Uh, but if eternity is perfecting things in all direction, then we get so. And the point of that, this is a great one for a theology of suffering, and God's goodness, when we talk about what if eternity makes things good in all direction, but also what what does that mean for time? What does that mean for our experience of time now? And that is really just answering a question with a question, because I don't know where to go I don't know where to go from there, except that I can foresee that that might be how it is. And
I
so
love that idea. And it actually, but it makes sense because, like, at the root of it, eternity means eternity. Like, that's what it means. So it's backwards and forwards. And you said something at one point, and it always stuck with me when you said that healing is just forgiveness, is just healing could be forgiveness that happened. How did you phrase it? It was, you were talking about the idea of CERN, which we love to talk about, but you were talking about the idea of CERN. And you were
Okay.
talking about the idea of, or I had that backwards. That healing was, am I still saying it backwards? Why
I
am I?
don't know. So I'm like almost there. I've almost got what you're talking about, but I don't know. I say so much. I say a
Because
lot of things, Elise.
yeah, so you said forgiveness was healing that could have happened like at a different point.
Okay, so I think probably you mean God's forgiveness for us.
Yes.
So I don't remember it specifically, but I
Yeah.
do. So it was, yeah, it was inspired by somebody's theory about CERN, which was wild. That that sort of the universe was, there were a bunch of early on, and with CERN, with the collider, they had like, it was like a comedy of errors. They kept having things that like disrupted
That
its
yes.
progress.
There was like literally a weasel in there, or it
And
was
like
like a
like a seagull dropped a baguette or something in one.
yeah.
I don't know if I feel like I made that up in my brain, but I actually don't think I did.
No, I think it was wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to see if we can find that for the notes. But there was some physicists posited, and this was like a thought experiment, but they're smart people, that the universe was working backwards to preserve itself, right? So from
There we
it's
go.
causing these things by working backwards to preserve itself. And I was like, oh, so it stopped you from annihilating it to preserve the existence of all humankind. The universe
Right.
that we're talking about is God, right? Like, I don't think God and universe are synonymous. I just think that a lot of times people say the universe when they mean God.
Right.
I don't personally think they're synonymous, but I think people use that differently. And and I think that talking about forgiveness, I can see that being, when we say something is like the whole world is going to be redeemed. That's the word, the language that the Bible uses, and I go, what what do we mean by redeemed here? Do we mean made okay, like made good,
Right.
which could be a point in time, but
Yeah.
redeemed could also mean it all was either made worth it, like we see the value of everything. God
Yeah.
used every single thing for good.
Yeah.
Um, but also, if you are a person who's lost a child, that doesn't help, at least not in the short term. Like, doesn't help you reconcile that. But what if, what
It's
if
healing in reverse. That's what you
yeah,
said. It was
healing
healing in
reverse,
reverse.
exactly, it's a healing reverse. What if forgiveness means our sins are literally eliminated,
Yes.
literally washed away in reverse when the resurrection comes? So, and then in Revelation, and I will put this in the notes, but in Revelation, there it says that the prayers, our prayers and tears are stored up in a golden bowl, which will like flow out over the land as part of it being perfect. To me, that's all of a sudden all of our prayers then are answered, being spread out. How would they all be answered if people that have been praying for centuries and millennia are dead? Are
Exactly.
they not answered in time? Does it not flow in all direction? Like, I don't know, but that is such a hopeful, promising idea to me,
Right.
that I think is just totally beautiful. Um, so that was that was the one. And the other one is very nerdy. And it has to do with sci-fi and fantasy and the ideas of time.
Love it.
But the thing is that like that's my, like where your like worldview and angle for how, I guess your lens for a lot of this is your, and how would you describe it? Fantasy realm,
Mm,
but like your, yeah.
yeah. Uh,
We
how do
gotta
I
talk
want to
about that one soon.
Yeah, I know. How do I want to summarize it? I don't know. I would say just maybe like through a supernatural lens,
Yeah, see,
Inc
that's much better. Yeah.
including like mythology. I feel like that is important. Like it
Oh,
plays a
I
part.
want to talk about that so bad. We got to do it.
I know,
Okay.
I know,
I know.
I
I'm
know,
like, oh, that's exciting. That's such a good one. That's gonna be one where I'm just like mostly nodding at you because you know way more about that. But that'll be super fun. Then okay, well, my view is definitely uh theology once removed, thinking about theology, but also I just like fiction. I read a lot of fiction,
I know.
and I'm not talking about Christian fiction. I Not that I don't, but that's not what I'm talking about. So
Yeah,
I mentioned I just read Wheel of Time, which is crazy, and I'm not going to go too much into that, but the concept of that, they say frequently, well, in it everybody's reincarnated, like everyone all the
yeah. Right.
time is reincarnated, and it's like it's known, some people can remember a little bit of the past. but the wheel, there's a God, the creator, but
Yes.
time is the deciding factor. It says the
Yeah.
wheel weaves as the wheel wills. That is so hard to say, but I've heard it so many times.
It's Kali, the Hindu god, is the one who's in charge of the wheel of time.
And that, okay, so that makes sense because this Robert Jordan said he was inspired by tons of different religions.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a whole beautiful Christ story in there too that I'd love to talk about, but talking about time in a way, God, and that time is God, is one of the gods.
Yeah.
And that a lot of that story, just there's some really beautiful stuff in that story, but a lot of it is that like that means that's such a dissatisfying way to live. And
Yes.
so and that's a lot of the issue. Some people want to destroy everything because it just keeps going. It's like the bad guys are the ones that want to destroy. Some of them
Right.
want to destroy, and I'm like, I kind of get it. I don't want to
Right?
keep repeating
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Although then there's also like it can improve all the time, and maybe you get to the point. I don't know, but I don't know where the lore ends with that one. So that didn't resonate. But it did speak to me of this desire we have to keep having an opportunity to do it again and again, which is the like what you're talking about, the religion that is born of, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
is that in essence what they're getting at?
It is. It's like it's a karmic thing. So
Okay,
you have to like you have to keep getting it right and you have to keep improving
okay,
basically. And it's
right,
also just as a side note, like that's also like enlightenment. Like if you are looking at it from like a Gnostic or uh
right.
like new age thing, like you're always trying to be enlightened. So you're trying to get to the next level and like
And this
shed the
is
bad
this is
stuff.
for the afterlife versus the next time you're in body.
No, this is right. Like you're trying to be enlightened now so that like you're trying to work your way up the rings eternally.
Wow. Okay. Well, that sounds really stressful.
Yeah,
I'm really,
it's just so much work.
yeah. I was just reading about the cult, the 3HO cult, which is the Kundalini yoga cult,
Yes.
which is I think there's a maybe a documentary. I was reading about it, but one of the women who left that said one of the big things they're afraid of is the worst things you're going to be and lots of bad things you could get you to come back. I want to say resurrected. What am I reincarnated as a cockroach?
Yeah.
And that was her. Like she had this horrible terror that she was going to do that. Um, and I'm thinking, and the way this impacted people's lives with the stress level and everything, it's
Oh,
like
for
that is
sure.
so because it's all on you. You just have to do better. You just have
You
to do
do
better.
better. Yeah, and
There's
then
no grace. There's no forgiveness.
no, because you can come back literally like as a plant or a rock or
Mm,
whatever, and then you're supposed to learn some sort of lesson and do better, and then maybe next time you'll come back as a cat, and then the next time you'll come back as a, you know, whatever. And
oh
but
wow.
I know for sure, like I know in the Hindu religion, it coincides directly to their culture, obviously, and they do have different classes, and I know they connect in some way,
So it's
like what class you're born into.
so it shows though that the way that we live is so influenced by the way that we perceive time and eternity.
Yes.
And I think to some almost sometimes to our peril, the people living so much uh for the afterlife, even Christians can do this. My mom has a saying, it's not her saying, but she says that sometimes some folks are so close to heaven they do no earthly good. Like they're
That's classic.
you know there's that, and it's a person, and I don't know, like maybe that's kind of joking, but there's uh this idea that they're living all of it to make sure that they get to heaven and everybody gets to heaven, which
Yep.
yes, that's good. We want everyone to be find Jesus and be with us for eternity, but also there's stuff to do here.
Yes.
You just be like, peace out, you guys are on your own. Like Christ had work for us to do here that was very clear. um
Yeah.
and it's not all spiritual work. I mean, it's all mission, it's all ministry, but taking care of the poor, loving our neighbors as ourselves, like caring for the elderly, the widows, the all those
It's
things.
literally
That's what we
being in
write.
the world. Yeah.
And so it's interesting because in theory, a karmic circular view tells you it's protective of of
Yeah.
culture and like so the society in a way.
Yeah.
So like I can understand where that came from because you have to constantly be doing better.
Right.
I think that is a misunderstanding of what God asks for us, for Christians that fall into that night. I don't think that's a super common thing, but I do think it happens. Um, so there's that whole worldview that just comes from a book, and it makes me think how you think about time is different. And one of the reasons I really believe in reading things that stretch your imagination, that are written on like a universal scale, of in time and everything, is I think so many of the reasons that I feel the way I do about eternity is because of that, of
Right.
the stuff that I read. But then there's one more, and it's different, and it comes back to Kristen's question. And I forgot that I was going to mention this, but I think it's so funny. There is this series of books that is, I mean, it's terrible. Okay. Like I there's this whole genre of young adult, well, it's not even young adult now, it's called new adult fantasy.
Okay.
Um and it's like often about fairies, but like
Okay.
FAE, right?
Yes.
So, and we're not talking about Tinkerbell. Doesn't matter. It's a mythological thing, but a lot of it, and in these books, maybe there's something else. Like maybe they're another kind of, they're this mighty warrior that's reincarnated from the past. But the point is that there's always this like thing that you can ascend to, and often what it is so, for example, in the one series that everybody's reading, which is, I'll just say it, it's A Court of Thorn and Roses, Thorns and Roses, and it's a
Oh,
whole
I've heard it.
series.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it is.
So I have read it, and
Is
it's
it good?
good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it
Okay.
readable? Highly. So there's actually it's got a fair amount of spice, as they say. Um,
Okay.
so like I won't recommend it to people.
Yeah.
Like I just can't. I had to skip it because I'm so uncomfortable. I just so embarrassing. Like I just don't want to read it. But
Yeah.
actually, the woman who wrote it, uh, she's Jewish. She has her education is very like she has very broad religious history, and you can see it in there.
Yeah.
And I have this idea that like we've talked about this too, that like the Christ story works into us, even when we're secular, even when we're not trying to. Christ
Yep.
will have his story told,
Yep.
and so it comes up in there. But one of the things that's really interesting about this story is there is a place where there are humans and there are the Fae. And the Fae live on the other side of this magical wall. And if
Okay.
you go there for the Fae, they're like humans, but just like better. So you put the most beautiful human looks just
Yeah.
kind of dull next to the Fae. The
Okay.
best food that the Fae eat, that the humans eat, is like dust in their mouth compared to this. Their beauty, they become, oh, their strength, their health, they heal faster. They're not immortal, but they're almost like effectively immortal. Like they can live for
Got it.
thousands of years. Their
Yeah.
aging is slow. And as such, well, there's a whole bunch of people who imagine with all that time on their hands turn very evil. But there is also this one place within it where people have used that time to develop the arts and to develop food and to develop everything. Like it's a place that is safe to live, where the poor are cared
Yeah.
for, where you would want to live forever because life is glorious, because
Yeah.
everything is beautiful and you are comfortable. And I read those, and that is actually what's so compelling about it to me. First of all, I love a
Very.
woman warrior. I love a
Yeah.
woman warrior. I don't know. I can't help it. Like I'm not gonna be one, but that God put something in me that just is
Yeah.
to that.
Yep.
Did you watch the first Wonder Woman movie
I did not.
years ago? There's a scene where all the women from her island, which now the Mascara, all the other like
Okay.
Amazons, they ride out on their horses across this beach. And
Yeah.
that's it. They're riding, all these women warriors riding out across. I don't know a woman, a single woman who did not start sobbing in that
Yeah.
moment. And I could cry now. I don't know why. It's so beautiful. It's not just
Yeah.
horses. It's a little bit
Yeah.
horses. It's not just the horses. It's beautiful. Like we need to watch that. I need to sit down with you. We got to watch that together, like on our phones,
Yeah.
because this moment, there is something about that is in us. But they have this. I'm reading this and it's like, oh, we have this longing in us because that is written so many times. You don't have to fear injury because you will heal. You have time to pursue these things and this knowledge, and they're so healthy, and
Yes.
they've built like it's so attractive.
Yes.
Why do we keep writing that? I, I think that desire is placed in us.
I think so too.
It has to be, because that is the ultimate paradise that we can imagine is some level of immortality in a
Yes.
perfected earth in a glorified body,
Yeah.
and that is what we get.
Right.
That
Exactly.
is what we get. That's why we care. And that's
Yeah.
why time matters or doesn't. But like, I think that's kind of it. Do you know like the trope I'm talking about, that vibe?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
And I think too, there are people like in the corrupted sense, like people will do anything to hold on to what they have here, and you know what I mean, and take all the power and try
Are
to
you
stay
talking
as
about like physically with their health, or are you talking about like with their stuff and power?
both,
Oh,
both
yeah, well, yeah,
because
both. Okay.
yeah, because it's like they don't have that hope. Like they don't have, they still have the desire for eternal life and like, okay, well, but that means I have to do it here. Like I have to do this. Like this is the one life that I get. So I have to do it. And it doesn't matter who I step on to get it or what I have to do to get it. I have to get it. But that's our hope, is that no, we will get that. Like we do end up with a glorified body. We do end up with time to do all of the things that we are interested in,
Right.
and that's our hope. It's not we have to do it all right now.
I think that that makes sense, that people who either have a life that is really happy. So the thing that is scary and sad, right, is the idea that, we won't be having children. We don't know what marriage looks like in that. We don't know what. So we're
Exactly.
like, oh, am I not gonna I'm not worried. I do believe that we're gonna be surrounded by the people we love, and those relationships will be different, but they'll still be pure and good, right? All
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I totally understand that
Yes.
the idea that I don't want forever. If if my life on earth is really, really good,
Yeah.
you might be like, but this is plenty. I have enough. I don't need forever.
Yeah.
That's a rare thing, but I also think people who've suffered a lot just are tired.
Yes.
Just
Well, exactly. And if you know people, or like I have a relative who is severely handicapped, and physically and not mentally, which is like a prison all in and of itself. But obviously he's stunted because of like all of his physical
right,
restraints and all of the issues that he's had. And I think a lot about that glorified body for him and his family, his immediate family who takes care of him day in and day out. It's like, of course, they would rather be doing absolutely nothing else and they love him so much, but their hope is that he'll be healed
yeah.
at one point. That's, yeah, that's our, so it does depend on your, like I always think like I love my stupid little life. Like I really do. Like it's nice and it's comfortable and it's great and I'm so lucky and I'm so blessed. But there are people who do not feel that way.
Right. Well, it's like that thing where people are like, "Oh, I don't like the idea of a judgment and a God that will take vengeance on things." And it's like, then you have not experienced injustice
Ex-
to want or
oh,
win.
Elise, exactly. Like that's honestly, like I know we've talked about this. Like nothing gets me more hype than justice.
And this is partly because of the work you do, of
Exactly.
course.
Like I'm talking like
Right.
actual justice, not undue punishment, not a softball, not I'm talking, when people act fairly and get what they deserve. It's like in both ways. Things that they deserve because they've worked really hard for, things that they deserve because they've lied and hurt and stolen and cheated and done horrible things, and it's like justice is a beautiful thing. I think justice and love, you can't have one without the other. You have justice and you have love.
And ooh, we're
And
gonna get
God is that, yeah, that's what God
yeah.
is. God
Ooh,
is justice and he's love.
yeah. So in the same vein, I can see how for some the idea of eternity is more attractive when they're going to have that glorified body, but I think that we don't realize how pale our best experience here is.
Yes.
So for me, just imagine, well, I don't know if this, like, if I imagine not being in any pain anywhere,
Right.
right? But not just that, like imagine, you know, right after you have like the where maybe it's the workout high or the post, you've been at the
Yes.
spa, or for me, like I've been in the sun just the right amount, and I got in
Yes.
cold water and then I got out, and there's whatever it is where your body feels the best it's ever felt.
Yes.
Take that times 1,000, and
Right.
I'd like, I'm never even gonna stop. I'm never going to sleep. I never move. I
Yeah.
don't think we realize how limited we are.
Exactly.
So I think when we get there, I actually think it's totally healthy and natural to wonder this. I think it means you're actually living in the here and now if you wonder that. And it's a great question, but I think that we might get this, it might just be so good that we might never want it to stop, and it might be really hard to see that from the other side.
Right. And I think you're right. I think you do get glimpses of it in that, like, that feeling. And you can think of it in a million different ways. Like, if you're, like I feel like everyone's one of their favorite memories is like that that day at the beach. I mean, if you like the beach, but it's like that day at the beach where you've gotten just the right amount of sun and you've been in the water and you're hungry and you're going to go out to eat and have a delicious meal with people you love, and like all of the things that people love and look forward to here. I think it's going to be 100 times
Mm,
more.
you know why that was so juicy, what you just said? Because all those things are so deeply embodied,
Yes.
right? Because we're
Yes.
talking about heaven. I don't know. I think that'll be like spiritual body, that interim
Yeah.
period. But you're talking about hunger and
Yes.
sun and feeling
Yes.
your body and exhaustion, like all those things that are like that was what we were made. Like that is how we're getting a glimpse
Yes,
of a
they're like
heaven.
beautiful, pure emotions.
And go to paradise. Go to like some when you're someplace really beautiful on a vacation. Like you're just like I never want to come home. I want to be
Yes.
here forever. Take
Yes.
that times a million, billion, whatever.
Yeah.
And or imagine you're in Prithian if you have read that. And and it is not I'm not actually recommending that, but I do think that there is a uh my mom might listen to this. Okay, I need to be very clear that I'm not recommending that because uh but I didn't know. You don't know what you're getting into. They don't start like that. But
Yeah.
they're so good too, though. There are parts that are so
I
good, and
hate that. I hate when that
yeah, I know
happens. You're like,
it's
oh,
hard.
what?
And I mean, they're not so good as literature. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's just that they're very entertaining. But actually, what I realized, the thing that reached to me, the thing that I loved, was this ability to be more, to be have a glorified
Yeah.
body, and to not have to worry about death and pain. And like, that's it. That's time. So
That, that's it.
we have more questions than answers as expected.
Always.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
But I feel like going into Easter, which is where we are, is a really good time to look at how time works because this is such a funny week. We're in Holy Week, but tomorrow is the Feast of the Annunciation. We're
Right.
experiencing time happening in such a weird, we're experiencing the time going in like such a weird way. Today's
Yes.
Sunday, but tomorrow we celebrate
Right.
and commemorate the day that Mary learned she was going to be the mother of Jesus. And on Friday, she loses him. And on Sunday,
Right.
she gets him back. We're experiencing, we're living this in the cycle of time. Time is all mixed up, and we're the way we're experiencing this and commemorating it. And I think that is Holy Week is the time to is such a good time to think about that. Pun not intended with
Right. Exactly. I know it's one of my favorite. I mean, Easter has always been one of my favorite holidays for this exact. It's such an important week. The whole week. I don't know. I'm just looking
this
forward to it.
this is a different kind of Easter for me and a
Yeah,
different
it
Holy Week for
is.
me. So I'm just in the beginning of it and I'm just really excited to see what this experience is like. And I'm glad that I can learn from you about some of those things because I don't know what's next and it's all very exciting.
That is.
Elise, go take some Easter bread to your mom and
I
dad.
know. I still have to ice it, so that's what I'm gonna go
Oh,
do.
okay.
I know.
Take your Easter bread. Can we see pictures when it's iced?
Of course.
All
You
done
know,
and
I'll
beautiful.
yeah,
I
you
already,
know
I
I'll
mean, I
send you
see.
pictures.
It's cute. Okay. All right. Elise, you're wonderful and I love you.
I love you more.
Bye, honey.